On today's show, with a couple of practice days, the Ottawa Senators have given an injury update on Linus Ullmark, David Perron, Michael Amadio, and Travis Hamonic.
And we've got the boys from Locked On Red Wings on the show today to give us the inside scoop on Ottawa's next opponent.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Monday, January 6th, and Pilsy, I'm officially worried about Linus Ullmark week to week with no timetable for his return.
I can't believe how casually Travis Green just threw out, so I guess we're calling him week to week. That's the most devastating news you could have as a head coach. Your starting goalie that's basically carried this team throughout their success in December, and the team's been terrible without him, and you're just like, we're not going to have him week to week, whatever, not a big deal. Pretty disappointing, Ross. And look, this was the underlying message of me trying to be careful playing Linus Ullmark too much, because this is the exact outcome I thought would happen if Linus Ullmark got injured. This team is in shambles, and I don't know what the Sens are going to do unless Levitan has his own version of the Hamburglar run. I am very nervous.
The merry run starts now.
The merry-go-round.
Yes, the merry go up the standings, please. And we'll see who gets the start in goal. Senators practiced yesterday. Levitan and Anton Forsberg in goal. We've got an early morning recording here, so follow at Sens Central for practice updates later. But we did get more injury updates. And again, on tomorrow's show, we'll talk more about the goaltending in general for Ottawa once we have an idea of who's starting against the Detroit Red Wings. David Perron, former Red Wing, was back, skated yesterday, progressing. Michael Amadio skated yesterday, progressing. Those are the best signs possible, is that this depth up front should be sooner than later. And after the crossover with Locked On Red Wings, we're going to ask, should Ottawa claim Arthur Kaliyev, a 23-year-old who was on waivers yesterday? We'll find that out at 2 o'clock, whether they did or didn't. But there's some history that shows maybe Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer would want this player. However, no surprise here, Pilsy. After having his worst game of the year on Friday, Nick Jensen missed the practice on Sunday with the flu. You could tell he's one of the best skaters on the team, and he just got absolutely dominated in a foot race.
Yeah, and multiple times, Ross. Those first two goals, he knew those were on him, and even guys on the bench were giving him taps hey, it's all good, buddy. Everybody has an off night, and you could tell he had his face in his palms being oh my God, I can't believe what's going on now. So that is not the Nick Jensen Ottawa Senators fans are used to seeing. And similar to Tim Stützle looking not at all like himself, there's a reason for that, both those guys with the flu. So we hope that a little rest and recovery gets both them back to the ways we need them to be playing at.
Sticking at the right side of the defense, Travis Hamonic, tough customer, man, coming back and finishing that game. He's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks with a lower body injury. That has to be a knee. Not a doctor, but that was not good the way his leg went into the board. So credit to him. We've always maintained that he is a tough bastard and blocks shots, puts it out on the line for his teammates. And unfortunately, there's other parts of his game that I don't think are NHL talent level right now at 34 years old. But obviously, you never want to see a guy get hurt. And we hope that Travis Hamonic has a speedy and full recovery to the lineup.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked he did come back, Ross, because when he went
and
down
right away, it was
it was a weird move, because when he went down, he pointed at his knee and was just nope. No, I'm done, and had to be helped off the ice and then came back. So I got to think that maybe wasn't the best decision. But yeah, we're hoping that he recovers. And but at least, Ross, it's good that Artem Zub came back, that this worked out timing wise, that Travis Hamonic is gone and Artem Zub is back, because that I mean, you could have brought Martin Palo up, but then you got to elevate JBD in the lineup, and I don't know if that's a recipe for success long term. So let's hope Artem Zub can get back to things, and hopefully his English is a little better, so him and Jake Sanderson can communicate.
JBD back practicing with Tyler Clevin on the Nodak Sens pair, Sanderson, Zub, and Shabbat was with Ben Sexton, assistant coach, with Nick Jensen out with the flu. We hope Jensen's ready to go tomorrow in Detroit, and not just ready to try, but ready to play, because he's obviously a huge part of this team. Bruce Garriock tweeting out a video of Michael Amadio and David Perron wrapping up an early skate before practice. So good to see that they're on the ice consecutive days, especially Michael Amadio with the concussion. And that's something where it's not a linear recovery. So for him to be back-to-back days on the ice, hopefully this is a good sign that they're ready to go, maybe as early as Thursday. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, this team needs all the help they can get right now, Ross. So we would welcome back Michael Amadio and David Perron with open arms for sure.
We would always welcome back the Locked On Red Wings boys. Let's jump to that conversation right now. A crossover between us and our friends Brian and Scotty. All right, we now have a Locked On crossover. Been a while since we caught up with the boys from Locked On Red Wings. We're over at Locked On Senators. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Piller. We got Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley here to break down the rebuilds that just keep going, one on top of the other. Then we flipped. We got a new coach bump in Detroit and in Ottawa. We're wondering what the heck is going on with our star goalie. But Brian, I'm going to snap it over to you here. What's the feeling in Red Wings land right now?
Well, if we had done this crossover a little over a week ago, if we did this pre-Christmas, we would be very down in the dumps, very depressed, because the Wings had lost 4 straight, and then they fired Derek Lalonde, and McLellan's taken over, and now all of a sudden we're asking ourselves, are we back?
I hope so.
There.
Are you back?
Scott,
are you
it's a
back?
great question. I think that's the $1 million question. When we were talking off air before we hit record here, like, it's odd because the race in the middle of the conference is just such a bleep show that it's like, well, I mean, I don't think they're back. Like, I don't think anybody is looking at a 4-game sample and is like, oh, like they're going to be in the playoffs now. But in the same breath, like you get a win on Tuesday and you're kind of back in the picture just because everybody is in the picture right now. So
Right.
we'll take the coach bump for now, but I think that is kind of the big question, and we're trying to just waiting for the other shoe to drop, or hopefully not.
Yeah, in the Eastern Conference, it seems like nobody wants that wild card spot, and everybody wants it. Like, everybody's so up, down. It's a weird situation. But Scott, I'll stick with you here on the coaching. Was it a surprise when Lalonde was fired? Like, was that something you guys have been hearing? Was he on the hot seat? Was it more like, hey, there's a really good coach in Todd McLellan available, so let's go for that? Like, what was the overall consensus when that firing happened?
Yeah, I would say that calling it a surprise would not be something that I would do. I mean, Brian and I were we probably had 4 episodes in a month that were like, all right, it's probably time. Like, I mean, it was definitely not a shocker team performance wise. I think there was kind of a hesitation of, like, are they going to do it period this year, or are they just going to let the year ride out and then do it in the off season? Because like, how many coaches are really available? I do think it was a little bit more of a surprise that not only they went out and got McLellan, but it's not an interim situation. He's on a multi-year deal immediately, right? Getting a multi-year replacement for your head coach in December is wild. Like that's not a very common occurrence. So I think that was maybe the surprise a little bit more. But the firing of Lalonde, no. I mean, they were playing unbelievably poor hockey. And the last 4 or 5 games especially, it wasn't just the results, but it really was kind of like the effort and just the optically the performances on the ice were brutal, man. So I don't think it was a surprise that he went. I think it was more of a surprise that they found a multi-year, like, this is your long-term replacement in the middle of December.
Yeah, I completely echo those sentiments. I mean, Scotty and I went into the season kind of with the assumption, like, this was going to be the make or break year for Derek Lalonde, right? Last season, the 2 seasons prior, rather, we had seen improvements on point production from the team. They went from what was it, Scotty, 85 to 91 between the 2 seasons. Actually, I think it was an 11 point. It was an 11 point jump. It was an 80 to 91. But we were saying because of that, the 6-game winning streak followed by the 7-game losing streak last season, we've seen the highs and the lows with Lalonde, and we were like, this is going to be the season where he's going to have to prove that he's this team's coach of the future. And they kind of stunk from the get-go. Even when they won, it was off of incredible goaltending performances or the power play just kind of being the reason why they won hockey games. They sucked at 5-on-5 all season long. And I don't mean they were getting outplayed. They were getting dominated at 5-on-5. And eventually just the players and the team got tired of it. And they stopped playing. That 4-game losing streak finished with a Christmas Eve loss to the St. Louis Blues at home, which the Blues, they're not the worst team in the NHL, but they're far from a Stanley Cup contender too. And to just get embarrassed on home ice on Christmas Eve in front of paying fans from a team that looked like they didn't want to play, Scotty and I we talked about that's got to be it. That looked like a team that had given up. And, Yzerman kind of said it in the introductory press conference. It's sometimes teams don't play. That's a one-off. But when it happens in multiple games, then you realize you have an issue. And that's when he made the decision to move on from Lalonde. And it was the right decision to make. I think McClellan in a lot of ways is the anti-Lalonde. And I don't mean to take pot shots at Lalonde. There were a lot of things that he said that I liked. In theory, I liked what he wanted to do. But I think McClellan kind of brings an energy to the locker room and a freedom of play style that these very offensive-minded players like Patrick freaking Kane, right? One of the most offensively gifted players in NHL history. It gives him the freedom to do what he wants rather than stick to a system. And that was the big Lalonde complaint, was they were so strict about staying within a system that it kind of snuffed out any creativity that these forwards had. And since they've come in, I don't know if you guys saw this, but it's kind of everywhere now. Todd McClellan said in their first practice, play effing hockey. You've done it your entire lives. And since he said that, they've been on a 4-game win streak where they've scored at least 4 goals in every single game. The offensive creativity is back.
What a coaching strategy. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, guys, play hockey. Under Todd McClellan, obviously a 4-game win streak after losing the first one. So they're 4-1 under their new head coach. Meanwhile, these two teams have played together once so far this season. It was a 2-1 win for the Ottawa Senators on December 5th, where you mentioned the offensive creativity just wasn't there under Lalonde. Only 20 shots on goal for Detroit in that one. Of course, the game was in Ottawa. The Sens had 32 shots in that one. Sens went 0 for 5 on the power play, but it was a last-minute goal from Michigan man Josh Norris, who scored both of Ottawa's goals. He's got 7 goals in 9 career games against the Detroit Red Wings, so we'll be watching for him on Tuesday night. I don't have to bring up the record head-to-head. It's been all in favor of Ottawa basically since those 2 straight games in Ottawa, I think 2 seasons ago, where you guys were making a bit of a push. But
yeah, the deadline.
Yeah, exactly, right there. Start of our Cabo trip, Pilsy. That's how we remember that. It was good vibes time. Ottawa just acquired Jacob Chikrin after that. We thought we were pushing and then went right into the ditch. But since that game, Sens and the Red Wings, the Wings are 7-6, and Ottawa is 8-5. So it's pretty close, 1 win off of each. What really jumps out at me, though, is the Red Wings have scored 41 goals versus 35 to Ottawa, but the Sens have only allowed 30 versus 45 for the Red Wings.
I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but I might just want to say this is an atrocious blue line still. This is it is Mo Sider, and that's kind of it. Ben Sherratt has been playing top pair in the McClellan era. That's not something we really wanted going into the year. But when Sider and Edvinsson were on a pair together, it was legitimately one of the best pairs in hockey. Analytically backed. Brian talked about it all the time. And so Lalonde would have Edvinsson and Sider as the top pair, and then Petrie Sherratt pair 2, which is a disaster. And then third pair was just whoever showed up that day, whoever they wanted, just kind of a revolving door of not very good production. And so they would just play the top pair every single time the Wings were in the defensive zone, and then they would play Sherratt and Petrie in pretty much every other situation, and then the third pair would get the offensive zone deployments. And that was just the lone way. And it didn't work. And so now McClellan has come in and he's separated Edvinsson and Seider. And it's led to, I think we've seen some flashes of like more blue line depth just because it's not so, top pair heavy. But I mean, it's still, you're talking about a blue line that gives, assuming he's going to be healthy Tuesday. He kind of got banged up and didn't return in our most recent game. But like Petrie and Sherratt are getting 20 plus minutes, 18 plus minutes on a blue line in 2025. That should not be any NHL team that's pushing for the playoffs plan. So like, that's kind of I still think the biggest question mark. The offensive creativity you're seeing, like Brian said, is back. The goaltending has been far better than I expected going into the year. This blue line is still somewhat of a train wreck, I would say.
On the other side, what's going on in Canada's nation's capital? That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, Locked On Red Wings crossover right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Mary J's. They're a locally owned cannabis dispensary in the Ottawa area. They got 4 stores that you can check them out in Ottawa. Look at Riverside South, Orleans, Greeley, and Russell. Mary J's offers the best and newest products in the market, and they're adding new stuff to the menu every single week to keep things fresh. Mary J's has competitive pricing. In fact, guys, they're going to price match any store in Ottawa. That means you're guaranteed to get the best price around when you shop at Mary J's. And they've got awesome customer service by having friendly bud tenders who are always ready to help you out. One of the owners, Dashy, absolute beauty, diehard Sens fan. So go to one of the 4 stores, say what up to Dashy, pick his brain about the Sens and all the latest, greatest products that Mary J's has to offer, and check out their website and get yourself a loyalty card. Mary J's Dispensary.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It is America's #1 sports book. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose now. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, welcome back. Crossover edition between Locked On Senators and Locked On Red Wings. You can find the show everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. So, we had that one matchup head-to-head, and in Ottawa, things have been high and then low. Pretty much the exact opposite as how they've been recently with the Detroit Red Wings. I want to ask you boys, like, what's your thoughts on the Ottawa Senators from an outside perspective this season? Scotty, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I bring up often, and your fan base is not too fond of me bringing it up, but it is what seems to be almost a patented like slow start that Ottawa gets off to seemingly every year. And it feels like this year wasn't exactly like that blueprint. It's kind of been a little bit more like sharp kind of twists and turns than it was just, oh, they were really bad for a couple months and then they've gotten really hot. Like it's kind of been a little more, I don't know, like rocky or roller coastery. Just, I guess I'll start with, I'll just throw it back to Ross for a second, but like, what has the vibe in the fan base that been? Because from the outside, it has looked as though every week is like a completely different team.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. Look, Linus Ullmark was unbelievable in the home opener. First game of the year, shut down the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. 1 goal on 30-some shots. He was awesome there, but then really struggled beyond that through November. He had like an .880 save percentage at one point through the first 10 games of the season. Then all of a sudden, things clicked for him. He shut the door. He's 8-0-1 in his last 9 games. It's just a matter of now him getting back to full health because he's simply not there. And now Ottawa's in a situation where Anton Forsberg has 1 win in his last 6 starts, 4 wins in 12 games as the backup goalie. He's just not going to cut it. And he's allowed 4 goals or more in way too many of those appearances. He's got pulled twice. So obviously it starts and ends with the goaltending in Ottawa, their power play as well. The funniest part of this, or the most confusing as a fan, is they've got a top 5 power play in the league at home, and they're second to last on the road. So it's just such a peculiar split. I mean, it's still 5 players versus 4, whether you're playing on the road or at home. So it's just a confusing one for me. Now, they have turned it around recently. They had 2 goals on the power play in Winnipeg, scored again on the road in Minnesota in 2 of their last 4 games, but it's been ice cold since then. So I think that's a fair assumption that it's been a different story every week. They have had, I would say, a less than ideal schedule going into Christmas with the World Juniors in Ottawa. You've got a 9-game road trip that's going to end Tuesday, but it's almost like a 4-game trip, and now just finishing it off because there was the Christmas break in between where everyone was able to go home and recover. So it's not as much of an excuse as it is just a lot of time out on the road in the last while. And 11 of their last 12 games of the season are at home. So we keep saying there's either going to be 10,000 people or 20,000 people at those games. There's not going to be any in between. But I'll toss it to Pilsy then on this one. Like, yeah, how would you describe the Sens season as someone who's not watching them every day? Because I feel like roller coaster is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Sens season has hinged on goaltending, which we knew it would, Ross. And I'm glad we've got a crossover episode with you guys, because I've got a question for you guys. Brian, I'll ask you this. We've been looking at trade targets for the Ottawa Senators to find a new goalie. And a guy I've been bringing up is Alex Lyon, because he only has 1 year at $900,000. And I've looked at the Red Wings. You guys have 1 million goalies. Cam Talbot, Ville Husso, Alex Lyon, Jack Campbell, Sebastian Cossa. Like, is that something that is feasible, or am I crazy here?
To the Ottawa Senators, no. Just because it's you guys. But in all reality, yeah, it's absolutely feasible. We've done episodes talking about it. The goalie room is so crowded, and like the going into the season, I don't think this was. Maybe it was, but I can't imagine this was the plan, to have 3 goaltenders down with the Grand Rapids Griffins when you're trying to foster Sebastian Cossa, who's been incredible. Like, at this point in his development, he needs to be getting as many starts with the Griffins as possible to make sure he's honing his skills to come up to Detroit late this season or next season, starting next year, with all the other contracts expiring. So we've done entire episodes dedicated to who should the Red Wings move. Cam Talbot's got 1 more year.'s been our best goaltender so far this season.
Just so interesting to see the contrast, because Detroit did go with that quantity over quality to an extent in goal, where Ottawa put all their chips into Linus Ullmark. Yeah. And now when he's out with injury, all of a sudden it's, what's going on? Now, it is worth noting Sebastian Cossa, the youngest goalie to win a game in the NHL this season. Levi Merrilainen, who you may see in Detroit, he's Ottawa's other goalie up right now, is the youngest goalie with multiple wins this season, both of them 22 and 21 years old. So the future could be bright in both nets, despite Ottawa dealing with some injuries in goal. Speaking of youth, we can't talk about a crossover with these 2 teams without the 2020 draft. And with a hot streak right now, Lucas Raymond has jumped 1 point ahead of Tim Stützle. Stützle with just 1 goal, no assists in his last 5 games. He's been battling the flu, hasn't taken part in morning skates the last 3 games, and has looked discombobulated for a guy who's a one-man zone entry. Just has not been able to get it going right now. We know he loves playing the Red Wings. He's had some success against them in his career. But what's been the deal with Lucas Raymond being able to pop off offensively? Is it as simple as playing effing hockey?
You know what? I think he's probably the exception to that. He was phenomenal still when Lalone was here. This is not a new coach bump for him. He was dang near point a game with Newsy, and that was a disaster of an offense for the team. It's weird. He started off the season with barely any goals, but he was like almost an assist a game, and it was just like, what is happening? Like he has 11 points in 13 games and 10 assists. Like, it was like a weird start to the season. And then once he started scoring goals a little bit more, then Larkin kind of took a little bit of the step back. He was the primary goal scorer on all of those Raymond assists the first 10, 12 games. And then they kind of switched a little bit. And then Raymond went on a stretch where he scored 4 and 4. And really, I mean, he's been unbelievable. And for a guy that just got a big contract extension, a 7-year extension over the summer. Him and Seider both, obviously Seider with 8 years. Both of them have looked phenomenal. There is 0 regrets or question marks about them and Larkin being the core of the team going forward. And I really do think Raymond has turned into like the true, it doesn't really matter what system or who he's playing with. Like, he's going to get his and he's going to produce every night. And that's been an awesome thing to see kind of blossom, not only because he got paid, right? That obviously helps a lot with the fan base, but just because that's like, this is truly the season we've been waiting for. And in his last 82, he has 82 points. He is point a game over his last 82 games played. So he's been unbelievable. And that hasn't even been a coach bump thing. That's just him and Larkin have been phenomenal all year.
Lucas Raymond with 4 goals, 7 points in 12 games against Ottawa. Meanwhile, Timmy relishes these opportunities, 14 points in 11 games, including 6 goals for Tim Stützle, who's been much better defensively this year. That's been a thing in the past with him. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to put up a ton of points, he's got 40 in 38 games right now, but you're going to be a -20. I mean, let's make that a little nicer. He's +5 this season to Raymond's -7. Obviously, plus-minus doesn't tell the whole story, but always look forward to seeing those two young guys go head-to-head as they have in the past. On the other side, rating the rebuild to date. Obviously, plenty of hockey left, more than half the season to go, but where do things stand right now, long-term and short-term, between the Ottawa Senators and Detroit Red Wings? That's more on this special crossover edition on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you're paying for twice? I know that's happened to me. It's probably happened to Ross. We all forget about our subscriptions, and that's where Rocket Money is your personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spendings, and help lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. I love the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've saved money thanks to Rocket Money. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
Welcome back to this special crossover edition, Locked On Red Wings, Locked On Senators. You can find us everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. And for you Red Wings fans that have us blocked on Twitter at Sens Central, give us another chance. Why don't you? Obviously, the rivalry's been heated over the last 4 years, basically since COVID. But my question to you, Scotty, how many teams do you hate more than the Ottawa Senators?
It's a great question. I think it's so odd because I don't think I have, I really do follow like all North American sports pretty religiously. And like, I'm not sure I am aware of a rivalry that has contributed less to the league they're in than this one. Like, these are two bad teams over the last 4 years. Like, neither of them, this isn't like they've been clashing in the playoffs or one stole the cup from somebody. Like, these are two teams that have gone nowhere. I mean, the Wings, because of
they've never played a playoff series against each other.
Neither of them have made the playoffs since this started. Like, it's so wild to me that like this is such a heated, like hated thing between the two fan bases. And usually they're, in the bottom half of their division standings when they match up against each other. Look, I am not as huge on the like I hate Ottawa thing. I poke fun at like the slow start thing because it's really low hanging fruit. But like I'm not as much of a like they're not number one for me. Like I still hate the Blackhawks far more. The Leafs, like the original sixes, are still really easy to like get fired up about. I mean it. I would say for more my own emotions, it's more of just like an energy in the fan base. Like it really does. It feels like, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but it feels like playoff hockey. Like when they play, like that's the electricity in the air, not necessarily the product on the ice. I guess it's more of just kind of like you're awake, man. Like when you play Ottawa, that that both fan bases are going to be reared and ready to go.
But it's so interesting, too, because I just pulled it up, and obviously there was the year where they weren't in the same division, where it was all Canadian division, that 56. So since then, this is wild. And this is probably why that it still matters, even though they're two bad teams. In 202 games, Ottawa has 95 wins, and in 203 games, Detroit has 93. Like, they are right next to each other. And then you look at the standings this year, and I believe, Ottawa's 2 wins ahead. So going into this season, it was identical wins over the last 3 years.
And if the Wings, and this is not a trash talk thing, but like if the Wings win on Tuesday, they're tied in points on the year. Yeah, they're both sitting at 40. So like they're just, and I think it started really. I'm not sorry, Brian. I'm just kind of like taking it away here, but like
you're good.
I think it started because the national media started comparing these two rebuilds non-stop. And it got so annoying that even when they weren't playing, like the fan base was like, holy cow. Like, I'm sure you guys were the same. It's like, can we stop hearing about the last place Red Wings and comparing them to us? And like, that's how we felt, vice versa. It was like, why are we being compared to 7th place Ottawa, dude? Like, we don't care. And the national media would not stop. And then they played against each other and it just fed into itself. The DeBrincat trade helped a lot. Like, there's just been a lot of...
Well, the Perron situation obviously helped too.
Yeah.
There's just been a lot of like small things that have really added up. And I feel like the media has really, like, maybe not even national, but like both local medias have really like leaned into it a lot. And it's caused this thing where now both our replies on Sens game day are a war zone. So it's
anytime you guys interact with our social media account, it's just like a flood of Sens, and like, oh my, they don't understand, or maybe you do understand what you guys have unleashed upon us.
Hey, they don't call us Sens Army for nothing,
right?
We're ready to fight on.
We could just be joking around, and all of a sudden we'll have like 10 Sens fans in our replies, and it's like, guys, calm down.
Well,
like,
it's also funny because
we're both 10 points out. What are we doing?
The two of you guys are like some of our favorite people to talk to in the network, so it's even funnier when like we're having a normal civil conversation, then somebody's in, it's like, you guys suck, by the way. That's cool. Yeah.
Well, I love how I called it the Perron Zub situation, just ignoring the Larkin cross check that started the whole thing.
Right. Certainly. Yeah, certainly.
And then Perron's on our side now, but he's just had a tough
Yeah.
year, obviously, individual off ice. He was going through some family things and then came back and got hurt right away. He's skating, but he won't be back for Tuesday. And that's kind of another piece of the puzzle where Ottawa's really needing an extra layer to their goal scoring up front. They're dealing with some injuries, but middle 6 guys, none of their top end talent up front. So it's like, that's a piece that Ottawa kind of needs to get going if things are good. But that's so funny that it's become what it is with Ottawa and Detroit. And I said it before, like I believe it. Obviously, Detroit's got a way deeper prospect pool, but I'd say Ottawa's got more under 25 talent already seasoning and playing NHL games consistently. Like Jake Sanderson's already at like 170 NHL games. You mentioned Edmondson, who's kind of like one draft later, both top pair potential left shot D, where Ottawa's further ahead in what's in the NHL. But then you look at the standings, and if Detroit can even be within striking distance of Ottawa this year, they're laughing with the Pelicans of the world, and also having Casper and other guys who are just starting to make their mark up. And we were huge fans of Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard going into the draft process. So it's going to be fun to follow, man, over the course of the next while. Pillsy, where do you stand on how the two rebuilds shape up?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because there are a lot of similarities, and yet I feel like there's a lot of differences as well. I mean, you already touched on the prospects, so I won't get into that. But certainly on the Senators, there's a couple key players that the success of this team will ride or die with them. So, Brian, I want to flip the question to you. For the Detroit Red Wings in this like era that they're in right now, who's the X factor player for you? Like the season, either they're going to make the playoffs or it's another year missing if this player is good or not good enough.
Oh, geez, that's such a good question.
Good question.
I mean, I feel like the cop-out answer is obviously Lucas Raymond. We've already talked about him. He's been incredible. But the thing about that is he's been so incredible. Like, how much more can you expect him to do? Who else on this team could provide that maybe isn't living up to that potential right now? And I think a lot of it's going to come down to either Alex DeBrincat or Patrick Kane. Now, Alex DeBrincat has been phenomenal this year. This season, he's been scoring the way we've expected him to score. But we saw last season how he can go through ebbs and flows, right? He would get hot, he'd get cold. This year he's been consistent. So if he can avoid a cold streak, that's going to go a long way to this team making the playoffs. And the other one is Patrick Kane, who has heated up tremendously the last, 5-6 games now, Scotty? Yeah. Just before Lalone got fired, he finally started scoring again, but he went 10 games without a point. Now he's scoring again, and he looks like Patrick Kane in the offensive zone. He's still a liability defensively, just like he has been his entire career, but he can outscore those problems when you put him in those situations, and now he's doing it. He had another 2 points against the Jets. And you know what a name, Scotty, that I'm just remembering now, and the reason I forgot is because he's been so invisible? The real answer to this question, and I'm changing my answer, I'm sorry. The real answer to this question is Vladimir Tarasenko.
Yeah, I wanted to hear about him.
100%.
He has been invisible for the Detroit Red Wings. So Cat has been consistent. Kane has heated up. Tarasenko has been invisible this entire season. He didn't even come to mind because he had been so invisible for the Detroit Red Wings. So if you can get Tarasenko, who's scored 40 goals twice in his career, multiple times in his career at least, to show up and become who you signed him to be.
That he was good in Ottawa and in Florida for the playoff run. Like, it's not like he's coming off a bad year.
Right. So, and we weren't expecting a 40 goal. We know what he is now, right? He's had shoulder issues. He's not in his prime anymore. We were expecting a 20 to 25 goal season out of Tarasenko, and he has 4 on the year? He's been very, very bad. And he's playing lower in the lineup. So, the talent he's playing with isn't as good as it is. He's playing on the left side when he normally plays on the right. Those are all important factors.
He's played top line this year, though, and he didn't do anything there either. He's down there because of failed opportunity.
And also, the flip side to playing with lower in the lineup, you're playing with less talent, but you're also playing against less talent. So you think you'd get a little bit better. So, if Tarasenko can start scoring at a decent clip, that will go a long way to pushing this team over the top.
For Ottawa, the answer is Jake Sanderson for sure. They finally found a partner for Thomas Chabot, Nick Jensen, who's just unreal. Now he's got the flu. We'll see if he plays on Tuesday. He had his worst game of the year against St. Louis, and again, probably wasn't 100%. But this guy, people in the national media, everyone's like, "Oh, you got rinsed in the Chychrun trade, all that." And I get it from an offensive standpoint. Chychrun's top in the league in goals by a defenseman. He's got more goals than the entire Sens D-corps. And if you look at it right now, it's so interesting with Ottawa too, because you're top 4 D pair. And again, Artem Zub being hurt a lot of the year. He's back now. He had a concussion, then a fractured foot. That put Travis Hamonic in basically an extremely unacceptable position as a top pair defenseman at 34 years old. But Jake Sanderson's a team worst -16 this year, and Hamonic's -10. And then you look at the other top 4 pair, Nick Jensen's +14 and Chabot's +10. Yeah. And look, plus minus doesn't tell the whole tale, but when one of your top 4 pairs is top on the team and the other's dead last, it's okay, what's going on here? And this is an interesting stat I just found. Look, I know players that are your top players are going to produce less in losses than in wins. It's just obvious, but only 4 assists in 17 losses this year and 16 points in 19 wins for Ottawa. It's about as cut and dry as when he produces, Ottawa has success. He's such a stud of a player. He plays the most minutes on the team. I'm sure people in Michigan remember him from the USN TDP. He was the captain of that age group. And he was 1 pick after Lucas Raymond. You can't say they made the wrong pick with how great Lucas Raymond is, but he would look pretty sick with Moritz Seider too, where it's he's just your all around stud top pair D-man, but having the inability to play with a consistent partner who's helping him out, it's glaringly obvious. So if you're a Sens fan and you're looking for an X factor outside of the goaltending, which is obviously make or break, but if you're looking at one player, it's got to be Jake Sanderson to get them over the hump. So we'll see how he looks. He's got more goals against the Detroit Red Wings, I believe, than any other team in his young career. Let's fact check that real quick. 4 goals.
4. Okay, good.
4 goals in 9 games against Detroit. And he's got 3 against Washington and no more than 1 against every other team in the league. So
what a clip.
He loves playing the Detroit Red Wings. And maybe he takes it personally that they passed on him in the draft. Who knows? But we'll be watching him closely. He'll be my locked on player. Pillsy, give me a locked on player for the Sens in Tuesday's game for all the Red Wings fans watching this Tuesday.
Well, sticking with the Michigan aspect, I'm going with the Michigan man, Josh Norris. He seems to come up when he's up against the Red Wings, especially probably when it's on the road in Detroit. I'm sure he's got lots of friends and family that go there. And this is a guy that Sens fans know if Josh Norris isn't scoring, he's doing pretty much nothing else. So we're hoping he can really pop off on the power play here up against one of the league's worst penalty kills for the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, and boys, Josh Norris has 3 goals in his last 13 games since playing Detroit. Those 2 even strength goals against the Red Wings are his last even strength goals. He has 2 on the power play and 1 shorthanded since then. So no even strength production. So I like that call. And I already mentioned earlier that his numbers against Detroit in his career are outstanding. So we'll see if that can come up. Who should Sens fans be watching on Detroit on Tuesday night? Scotty, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think really quickly as a group, I think watching the Wings penalty kill is probably a good place to start because it's been an atrocity. They were like off to a historically terrible start. They were, I mean, we're talking like barely over 60% over a month in. Like they were horrendous. And it's picked up a little bit lately, but like as you can see, picked up a little bit, still has them in 31. So not great. So I think that, I mean, you mentioned the Sens power play and how weird that's been, home versus road splits and whatnot. So I think that's probably something you guys should watch out for. But as a single player, I really do think when you look at the past Sens Wings games over the last 3 years, that a lot of times it comes down to the Sens just are so physical against the Wings. And the Wings cave in. Like that was the thing, what was that 2 seasons ago? We were talking about it earlier at the deadline, right? Like when you guys just pumped us on the back-to-back.
Who wants it? And then Brady gave Jake Wallman one of these in front of the net. Like,
right.
Yeah.
It was just an absolute, like you just got out physical. And the Wings had nobody that could really match that style of play, and they completely drove them to getting their teeth kicked in on back-to-backs. And I think that's really maintained every time they play each other. So I'm going to go with Seider just from a he is the number 1 defenseman on this team. He is comfortably the best defensive option this team has. 8-year extension. He's the young star. It's very easy to point to him and say, he needs to produce if you want to win. But like for these games specifically, where that your opponent is A, very physical, and B, has the ability to score in bunches when they're on, like you're going to need your best defenseman to A, he's probably going to be pushing half an hour of ice time, and B, he needs to play well for it. And I think that is he's a guy, he's going to get power play 1, he's going to get PK 1, and he's going to lead in 5-on-5 ice time. Like he's going to be out there legitimately for maybe half an hour. So I think that he's going to be the direction I had, and he's going to be a huge X factor.
Great call out there, Scotty. I just looked it up. The Sens are 3rd in the league in hits per 60 minutes so far this season. Detroit's sitting at 28. So the physicality will definitely play an impact. Brian, how about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, the Red Wings are a small, skill-based forward core, so it's not too surprising to hear that they are a little bit more skill-based, not going for as much physicality, and that comes back to bite them when they play a team like the Ottawa Senators. I mean, again, not to sound like a cop-out, but like if the Red Wings are going to win games, you need your best players to continue to be your best players, and guys like I'm going to go with Alex DeBrincat, just simply because former Ottawa Senator, and he scored a goal last time. He scored the only goal I think the Red Wings had in the last time these two teams met. Every time he touched the puck. Yeah, the Bluebirds game.
Booze. Every time it's not even when he scores, when he touches the puck.
Dude, did you guys see at the World Juniors, they're still in the semis yesterday, they were still booing that Czech kid who grabbed his knee after a hit against Canada in the game before. Like the crowd was cheering for Finland against US, but would still boo, or Czech over the US, but would still boo this kid every time he touched the puck. We got long memories. Just ask Danny Heatley. He was getting booed 7 years after he left.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, you could have picked like 25 former Sens, though, Brian. You guys have Tarasenko, Tyler Mott, Cam Talbot, and Alex DeBrincat. Where's Austin Watson when you need some physicality?
Yeah, get the physicality.
Hey, man,
let's go.
Don't even tempt me. I'm down always. That's
where he's at,
man. I'm always down.
He's leading the Grand Rapids Griffins in points right now. That's what he's doing.
Hell yeah.
Oh,
hey,
okay.
good for him, man.
Nice.
He was a great story in Ottawa. I liked him here. Okay, that's awesome, man. Hey, this was a great show. Great to take the temperature of the Red Wings and the Ottawa Senators, and we look forward to these games always. And to answer my own question from earlier, Montreal's number one for most hated teams. Then I'll go Toronto, Pittsburgh, and then Detroit.
Oh yeah, I've got Detroit ahead of Pittsburgh now, Ross.
They've beaten them out 4 times in the playoffs against Ottawa. We're 4-1 since 2007.
What are playoffs? I don't know. That's not in my memory bank anymore.
Yeah. Well, hey, my hatred for the Penguins.
It's almost impossible to stop.
I just absolutely love that. I use that clip all the time. Drake Batherson scored a goal backdoor where it just hit him and went in, and Jari goes, "You got to get that out of the game. I don't know how we do it, but you got to get it out of the game."
A guy just standing there.
Yeah, it was an unreal clip, so we use that all the time here. For more, go check out Locked On Red Wings and Locked On Senators everywhere you get your podcast, and we'll be catching up with you boys later on in the year. Let's take a quick look here. Detroit, Ottawa, when are they playing later on? March 10th and March 27th. So hopefully we're both in the mix by then, and hopefully those are some high leverage games. But keep doing your thing, man. Honestly, two of the most talented people on the entire network. We appreciate you. Scotty, Bentley, Brian Fisher. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been a crossover edition between the Locked On Senators and the Locked On Red Wings podcast. Your team every day. All right, Pillsy. Before we wrap up the show, chatting Arthur Kaliyev, Sens on Reddit, on Twitter, ironically, tweeting, starting tomorrow, the Sens will play 12 games in 20 days. There will be 3 sets of back-to-backs, including 2 with travel between games. So if you miss Sens hockey over these 3 days without a game, buckle up because it's coming back in a big way.
And what a time to be packed with back-to-backs when you don't have your number one starting goalie out with a back injury. Back-to-backs with no back injury. Dang it.
Uh-oh. But could reinforcements be coming from out of the organization with Arthur Kaliyev, long rumored to be on the move from LA? Hadn't really got much opportunity there, and honestly hadn't really taken advantage of the opportunity, especially last year. Just 7 goals, 15 points in 51 games, while averaging just a hair under 12 minutes a game. He's a player who's 23 years old, was drafted 1 pick after Shane Pinto, so second pick, second round in the 2019 draft, and in 188 career NHL games, he has 35 goals and 71 points. Ottawa being in the bubble right now, they're probably between 12th and 15th in terms of waiver order. But would you put in a claim for Arthur Kaliyev if you're Steve Staios?
Absolutely. Like, I can't hear any arguments about why you wouldn't put in a claim, right? Like, if you get him, you get to try him out. He's a goal scorer. You can put him on the second power play unit. I think he's a younger version of Adam Gaudette that you hope you can find lightning in a bottle and you can really get things going. This team needs help on their bottom 6 with secondary scoring. I know Amadio and Perron are skating, so they'll be back soon, but it's a free flyer. And obviously the connection with the Hamilton Bulldogs and Steve Staios makes a lot of sense. They've been rumored to be looking at him for a while. The one thing, Ross, that is kind of interesting about this, though, is if the Kings are putting him on waivers, which they are, and the Ottawa Senators wanted them, like you mentioned, they're not top priority in the waiver wire list. You would think they would just give them a low ball offer, like, I don't know, like a 7th round pick or something, or a 6th round pick to guarantee they get him. Unless they're playing hardball, Ross, and they're like, look, we got to hold on to all the assets we have. We know they're going to send him on waivers. We'll try our luck there. I'm not sure. But it's just interesting to note that, like, they've been tied to him for so long. If they wanted him, you got to think they could have got him for a cheap price.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And when you think about what you have to give up for a guy who'd be on waivers anyways, like, is it too much to pay to get him in the mix? I'm curious to see. I think he's going to be claimed. I just don't know 100%. By who. Yeah. So that's where it gets really interesting to me. We'll be watching for that at 2:00 today. Let us know in the comments as well. Should Ottawa claim Arthur Kaliyev? Why or why not? I like your comparison to Adam Gaudette, and they caught lightning in a bottle once, so why not try it again with Arthur Kaliyev, who has that long connection with Steve Stais, Michael Andlauer, former teammate of Jan Yannick. So worst case scenario, you put him in the minors if he clears waivers again, and then get him cooking down there. Belleville could use some extra goal scoring as well. All right, that's it for us today. Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Locked On Red Wings. We'll get back to them later on this season. And we also did clip some of that interview just for timing purposes. So tomorrow on Locked On Red Wings channels, you can go check out the entire interview. For now, we say goodbye. Have a great day. Thank you for watching, listening, and engaging with the show. We'll be back tomorrow for a game day preview, Senators versus Red Wings. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.